to the Independent Thinking Online Children's Book Festival in partnership with the amazing Sue Atkins and the Sue Atkins Book Club. Also linked up with the Roving Bookshop. We give them a mention as well. They're doing amazing stuff, taking books into schools. And every one that we've done so far, and I've said this, I think at each one is different, which is what I love about this. I'm learning so much about all sorts of aspects of children's authors, children's books, things that children can get into. But some of the books are more about rather than aimed for children. And this is an example. This amazing looking book, as well as an amazing book in terms of what's inside it, is by Katharine Hill. It's called A Mind of Their Own. Anybody with teenagers will know exactly where that title might come from, but we might get Katharine to explain that. So Katharine, welcome to our book festival. Just introduce yourself and tell us, where did that title come from? Where did that book come from? What got you into what you're doing now?
Thanks, Ian. So it's really great to be part of this festival. So I'm Katharine Hill and I'm the director of a national charity called Care for the Family. And we aim to provide support for families, strengthen family life across the UK. But my role in that, as well as leading the organisation, is I write and I speak. And my latest book is this one, A Mind of Their Own, Building Your Child's Emotional Wellbeing in a Post-Pandemic World. And I think it came about because we were already really concerned about the level of mental ill health in a whole generation of young people. Hardly a week went by without headlines being there about overstretched services, rising levels of anxiety. And so I wanted to write a book that would equip parents to build emotional well-being from the get-go. Lots of really important work is happening, helping those who are in crisis. But this was to be what we call it Care for the Family. We talk about being the fence around the top of the cliff rather than the ambulance at the bottom. So wanted to do that, started writing it. And then 2020 came. And so when I started writing it, many of us had never heard of a place called Wuhan. Social distancing wasn't a word that we used in our everyday vocabulary, but the pandemic came. And so actually the messaging of the book feels even more timely for many parents. So that's how it came about.
I've always said that books know when they're ready to be written. And if your book had come out just 6 months prior to the pandemic, it would be not as relevant, not as pertinent, because you've been able to make it around. It's not about the pandemic, but you've certainly been able to angle that towards it. And there are so many things that are now more visible to adults working with children. Like I said, it happened before. We were worried about their well-being, but there are so many other things now that seem to have come to a head in the last little while. What is your background? You set up this, you work for this charity. What is your background before that?
Well, my background originally was as a family lawyer. So I worked in the area of family breakdown, helping people through divorce, custody, adoption, care proceedings. And I think through seeing just the tough stuff of family life, when for all kinds of reasons family life hasn't worked out for people, that really inspired me to want to work and do something on the end of prevention. But I stopped being a lawyer. I'm married, we've got 4 children and now 3 grandchildren. And so I had a break when our kids were little, and then I joined Care for the Family, which has been going now for 30 years. I've been working for them for about 20 years. So
so from the legal side of it, you're able to see when families weren't working properly or were doing harm to each other. You wanted to again be that fence before things became worse for the children.
I think, and just the heart of it, really, just, how devastating it is. One of our values at Care for the Family is vulnerability. So we want to come alongside families. And in my writing, I try and do that, giving some really good ideas, really practical advice. But also, none of us have got this all sorted. We all mess up, but there's stuff that we can learn to make it better for our kids.
Yeah, I like that. And the book is a nice blend of your experience and other people's experiences, and then the research. It's all thoroughly researched and reference, which is great. Such a breadth of research as well, whether that's psychology or neuroscience or biology or family science, if you like. You mentioned in the book that teachers are heroes on more than one occasion, and bearing in mind that for the independent thinking audience, it's mainly going to be, or a lot of it's going to be teachers from primary and secondary, and including special needs. What in your book is relevant for teachers? Why are they heroes for you? What role does the teacher play in supporting a family to be healthy?
I think if people didn't already honour and respect teachers, I think having seen how they have gone above and beyond in the last 15 months will have made us realise what a key role they play in our kids' lives. And yeah, I would say all the book is relevant in that context. So I wrote it for parents, but carers, teachers, anyone with a heart for children, there's stuff in it for them. But the school setting is a really important environment for building our children's emotional well-being. And it's actually the arena, it's the stage when a lot of this stuff is played out. So there's a chapter on friendship. There's a whole chapter called What Does Success Look Like? And the pressure that many of our young people are under in terms of academic success. So whether they're the high achievers or what I call the underperformers, but the ones that have different gifts, the ivory towers of academia may not be for them. And in terms of, there's a chapter called It Takes a Village, and a section in that really about the vital importance that teachers play as mentors, as just another voice for parents speaking into their children's lives, and just the importance of working with each other in that. Two of our children, well, my son and his wife are both teachers. So I have a little inside track also on seeing the important work they do.
And how hard they've worked during the pandemic.
And how hard they work, exactly.
Right, what the government and the papers might say. Yes, we won't go there. I mean, one of the things that early on in the book you refer to is attachment theory. Now, that is something schools are increasingly, certainly in Scotland, where they're doing a lot of work in this sort of area. There are schools in England who are looking into it, not because the government's telling them to, but because they know it's important, and elsewhere as well, who are starting to understand issues around things like attachment theory or being trauma aware, or the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences. And attachment theory isn't something I was, when I trained as a teacher, even though it's from the 60s, and a guy called Bowley, I think.
Yeah.
Can you just explain that a little bit? Because that seems to be right at the beginning point of any child's journey, is the attachment theory. And what are the implications for schools, especially around behaviour, when, again, I'm talking about in England, especially, behaviour is seen as a default and a defect and something that needs to be corrected because the child is being naughty, as opposed to there might be other things going on. So if you could just start with attachment theory for us, please.
Yeah, so one of the chapters in the book is called about, why family matters, and the fact that our family, whatever shape or size, is the place where we learn to love and to be loved, to forgive, to be forgiven. We see how conflict is resolved. And key to this is exactly as you say, in attachment theory, which is a theory that was brought about by a guy called John Bowlby I think it was in the 60s. And it's the idea that when a baby expresses a need through crying, and then a parent picks it up and loves it and comforts it and meets that need and feeds it or whatever, the baby knows then that it's valued, that it's important, that its needs are met. So then it's able to express that need again. And it's really key to how we know that we're loved and that we're lovable. And of course, in schools, our academic success is really important, but so important also is our emotional well-being, and that they work together. And so I think just understanding the effect. So there is some really sobering research about the actual brains of little babies that were experienced severe trauma as babies, and their brains are just different and smaller and underdeveloped than a child that has received that nurture and that consistent love and care. And I would say that's a sort of foundation really of the book. I talk about all the different parenting things that you get in most parenting courses. So things like, talking and listening to our children and spending time with them and putting boundaries in place, which are about security. But the thing about this book is also there's some really key messages that are about emotional well-being, because most of us know how to build our children and help them grow physically. But, we get them to eat their broccoli, and we put stair gates up, and we teach them to cross the road or whatever. But there's key stuff about how we can help them grow emotionally and what an important role we play in that.
No, I love that. And you talk about talking to your children. You've also got a series of zip it boxes, which are the things not to say to your children.
Many of which I have to say, hand up, I will have said. But yeah, they're quite fun. And that's one of the things about the book. I wanted it to be really practical. So there's loads of stories in it that embed it in family life. There are these little zip it things. There's some really fun cartoons by the illustrator David McNeil, who's illustrated all my books. They actually make you laugh out loud on some of them. But the other thing, at the end of every chapter, there are some action points and also an activity that families can put into practice some of the learning from that chapter in the everyday things of family life, sort of really practical stuff.
I like the book because if you're a teacher and if you're a parent, you get a double whammy by reading it. But even if you're not a parent or the children have grown up, if you're like, for example, a primary teacher where you're trying to create that sense of family, maybe for children who don't have a sense of family outside of the school. So there are so many tips and ideas that you can embrace by understanding. I mean, the children will always suddenly call you the teacher mum or dad by mistake. Although Siri, that was one I heard recently, a child.
Oh, no. Or Alexa, yeah.
Yeah. But there's obviously some connection there that they see that parental role and that figure, and we can use that, and we can develop that. And you talked about love. One of our associates is a consultant pediatric neurologist and written a whole little book of big stuff about the brain, Dr. Andrew Curran. And he talks about attachment theory and all the stuff that you're referring to. And he talks about the need for that child to be loved, for that child's brain to feel it. And he'd done work in Romania where the children in the orphanages had experienced that complete lack of nurturing, lack of care, lack of love, and had died, and their brains were entirely disfigured, like you say, not through any illness, just through that lack of love. So understanding at a neurological level, knowing the role that teachers can play in maybe filling those deficits or reinforcing the things that are going on at home are incredibly important. And you talked about the word need. And this is where, if you want to start an argument on Twitter, just use a sentence that includes the line, all behavior is a sign of an unmet need. If it includes that sentence, then there's an argument brewing. But so from your perspective, Katharine, can you just sort of explain why you would suggest that statement, all behavior is a sign of an unmet need, is a valid statement and not just letting naughty kids off the hook?
Yeah, I think that very often when a child, I think I express it in a slightly different way in the book and say, I think it's in the chapter where I'm talking really about the school context. And very often if a child can't speak out a need, they'll act it out. And I've seen that with my own children as well. And so in terms of teachers, if you know that a favorite pet has died, if you know that there's difficulty in the home for whatever reason, and particularly for the more vulnerable kids, then actually just knowing that helps us, like you say, not let them off the hook, because boundaries, and I make that, there's a whole chapter on boundaries called That's the Line. They're so important for our children's security. And I think there's nothing more destined to bring insecurity to a child, to know that there aren't any boundaries, or if there are some, that no one cares if they cross them. So it's definitely not about letting them off the hook, but just understanding the root cause then helps us deal with some of this stuff. And just going back to what you were saying about the brain, I think the other thing I'm so excited about with this is just how amazing our brains are and what scientists call the plasticity of the brain. So there's a chapter on positive and negative thinking. And I tell a story about these two girls in a changing room, and they do what girls love doing best, and they're taking selfies. And then one of them posts them and gets a mean comment, and as well as lots of likes. But she can think positively. And so she's able to rise above it and think that her top actually looks great and it's a good bargain. Whereas the other one, someone makes a comment that she's got scrawny arms, and she goes into complete free fall and her whole day is ruined. And it's the power of negative thinking, and just unpacking how we can help our children learn to think more positively. And when we do that, their brains actually change. It's so amazing. And I think really empowering for parents.
From that chapter, one other thing I took from it, and I'm going to test you on your own book now, was the 3 C's. I think you were quoting somebody else in this, but they talked about the 3 C's of negative thought. Remember what that was?
Oh, yes, I do know that one. Phew. Yeah, so if our children are thinking negatively or they're catastrophizing, you can catch the negative thought, challenge it, and then change it. And there's one of the exercises in that book is called blue to true thinking, which is exactly the same thing in a slightly different way. And so you get them to write down that negative thought, pop it on their phone. That's the blue thought. Then you tell them what the truth is, and they put that on their phone or write it in a notebook. And then when those blue thoughts return, they've got that to come back to. And again, just a little practical thing that we can help our children with.
I love that. I can see parents do it. I can see teachers, tutors as well. What I was going to say about family is that in a secondary school, the tutor group done well is another recreation of a family, and the same rules and the same tips and techniques can apply in that role as well, and the same role that the tutor might play to the child, to their big family of 30 wild children. Linked to what you were just saying, and this is one I've been talking to teachers about for years now, it's the idea of praise and the importance of it, but the importance of getting praise right, so it doesn't actually then turn into this monster that doesn't do anybody any good. So just tell us, what should a parent or a teacher understand about praising their child?
Yeah, so there is a whole chapter on the importance of it. There's a proverb that says our words have the power of life. And so praise is really important. I got into a bit of trouble on BBC Radio London. Well, not into a bit of trouble at all. There was just a lively debate about the chapter called It's Okay to be Ordinary. And in that, I talk about the fact that somehow this message has crept into our culture that we're all winners. You know, there's Love Island and Britain's Got Talent and all those things that give our children this message that they all can be extraordinary. And of course, they can be the best them that they can be. But we can't all be extraordinary, and that puts huge pressure on them. So within that context, specific and process praise is really great. And many teachers listening to this will know about growth mindset as opposed to fixed mindset. And growth mindset enables children to understand that when they work hard at something, when they persevere at something, that actually that is then the secret to success, not just their fixed talent. So if we praise effort and we praise character and we praise the process, that is so much better for their emotional well-being. So there's so much we got wrong with our kids, but I know one thing I think we got a little bit right was after they'd worked for their exams, some more hard than others, we'd take them out for a pizza or do some family celebration before they got the results, just to recognize this is the effort that we're praising. So that would be that.
I like that. Celebrate rather than praise or reward, because that's a bribery. Celebration is just, well, I'm testing you again. Second test, you've done well so far. Why are birthdays good for self-esteem?
Oh, now this is my pet subject. I'm a huge fan of birthdays because they're not about what you've achieved. They're about who you are. And I love in our kids' birthday cards, just writing every year, I just write, you are, and then I put some of the qualities that I've seen in them. You know, you're an adventurer, you're courageous, you're compassionate, you're whatever it is. And yeah, that really, again, that builds their self-esteem. So I'm a big fan of birthdays.
I love that. I love that. So one day where you can feel special just for being you.
Exactly. And that is the key of this. This is helping our children discover their identity, who they were made to be, and what gifts they've got. And that's the context in which they flourish.
Yeah, I like that. And don't get me on to non-competitive sports days. I've spent too much of my life looking at loads of children throwing beanbags into hoops for no purpose whatsoever. We won't go there.
I did. I expect you read the story on that. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And the pass the parcel for every child gets a present, which again, I did. But
measuring the number of bits of paper and to match the number of children in the party, that's extreme. That's extreme. In fairness. Time goes quickly. We've talked about you can read a little bit from the book. So are you happy to read the bit about
I would love to do that.
Pandemic bit, is that okay? So yeah,
I will do that. It's a little bit from the chapter that's about the pandemic. And just as a context, I think the pandemic has put a magnifying glass on family life. And whilst a very few children have actually done okay, for the vast majority, it's been so tough, particularly the most vulnerable. And so just, the chapter at the end, I thought I'd read a little bit from that, just about how our children have responded, but also the opportunity that it is. So for children and young people, the changes brought on by the pandemic have formed a perfect storm. Younger children have missed the structure and routines of the school day, the school run, play dates, sleepovers, birthday parties, and sport. Schools are reporting that children that were previously potty trained have regressed back into nappies or forgotten how to use knives and forks. And at the very time our teenagers should be flexing their muscles of independence, they find themselves grounded and in an educational limbo, with life as they know it on hold. Perhaps it should come as no surprise then that 1 in 5 children have reported persistent stress during lockdown, which is in itself a predictor for mental health disorders. Rites of passage represent important milestones in our children's lives, and many school leavers feel that COVID-19 has robbed them of experiences that should have been filled with excitement, fun, and emotion. So farewells to teachers and classmates at end-of-term events, proms, transitions to a new school, they've all been taken away, and there's a sense of loss and grief, often masquerading as sadness, anger, or irritability. So Mia, who was in her final school year, said this: "We had an assembly where we heard that school was going to close, and then we got to take a few pictures and some people signed T-shirts, but not everybody had one because they weren't prepared. It's really sad how school ended early, because I don't think any year 11s really got a proper last day of school. They didn't get a proper send-off like they usually would." And then she says this: "It doesn't feel real. It feels like we're in a movie and something's gone wrong." And then I go on just to say, perhaps it is no surprise that there's a growing body of evidence that suggests the fallout from the pandemic on our young people's well-being could be significant and long-term. But before we add the effects of COVID-19 to the list of things that keep us up at night, it's important to recognise they're not a prophecy of our children's future lives. We're seeing normal reactions to an abnormal set of circumstances. Of course, if our children exhibit an ongoing pattern of behaviour and we're concerned, we should seek professional help. But we should think twice before medicalising feelings of boredom, frustration, loneliness, or confusion. Our 8-year-old not wanting to get out of his pyjamas is not necessarily an indication that he is depressed. And our 15-year-old gaming into the night and raging against the world doesn't automatically equate to them having an anxiety disorder. Clinical psychologist Dr. Roger Brotherton commented, "We think of the generation who grew up in the Second World War not as a damaged or a lost generation, but as one of the most resourceful, resilient, and stoic, because they learnt so much from facing challenges in their youth. In the same way, this generation need not be overwhelmed or damaged by the pressures and challenges of COVID-19. Parents are the biggest influence on their children's lives. And if we apply the principles of this book to our time together during lockdown, we have every opportunity to help our children grow stronger, more adaptable, and resilient."
I like that. Very optimistic, positive, hopeful towards the end.
Definitely a message of hope. It's got to be a message of hope. And it's true. It's absolutely true. With the right support, our kids are going to come through this stronger.
I like that. And you talk about COVID-19, and there's a cartoon in the book saying where the little girl saying to the dad, "What was COVID-18 like, Dad?"
I know, that's great, isn't it? And another one, there's a granny, I think, with her granddaughter looking at a photo album, and she says, "Granny, why aren't people wearing masks?" So
Brilliant. Okay, so Katharine, if you can just tell us if you have a website, how people can get hold of you. We've already said that the book's available via the Roving Bookshop. Just tell us how we can find out more about your work.
Okay, so obviously through the Roving Bookshop, but also the publishers, muddypearl.com. And then I'd love people to check out the Care for the Family website. So it is www.careforthefamily.org.uk. Loads of resources there to help family life. And you can also get the book from our shop on that website as well.
And
then you can find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Katharine with an A in the middle.
With an A in the middle. So Twitter, you're Katharine
M. Hill.
M. Hill. Yeah, I'll put the link in there as well. So that's lovely. That's been really interesting, really insightful. As a parent of older children, I can see the things that I did wrong, but they're okay. They're all right. You know, we have to be kind to ourselves as parents, don't we?
Definitely, 100%. That's how I end the book. I say, will we get things wrong? Yes. Will we mess up? Yes. But we can be confident.
that love and that unconditional support, and they won't go far wrong. There's so much for teachers to take away from that as well. Good. So, and good luck with all your future plans. Good luck with the work that you're doing with the charity, and thank you for coming along.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks everyone for listening.